So when you're in a squatting position, once the muscles of the legs have let go, you can easily come into a squatting position. The spine will be much more erect. Now, what happens when you come into a squatting position for most people is it may be difficult to get the toes down. That's one of the difficulties. And the reason it's difficult for the heel to come down is the calves are very tight. Calves can often relate to individual being stressed. Find that if the kidneys are having stress on them, sometimes calves get very tight. There can be a lot of other reasons. The other thing is there can be tremendous weakness along the outside of the lower leg. So these things can be resolved over a period of time. If I'm in a squatting position and I want to begin to develop a little more balance in the ankle so the heels can begin to come down, one of the things that you can do is just try to lift the toes away from the floor. Now you may need to put your hands down as you're doing this, but lifting the toes away from the floor in any yoga pose to begin to strengthen the muscles on the outside of the lower leg becomes particularly important if you if you want to release the calf. You have to have some muscle that turns on in the lower leg to release the calf. So let's take an example. If I'm pulling on my foot, trying to draw my foot back, and I'm pulling very strongly on my foot can only go so far back. And I'm pulling very strongly. But if I engage the muscles in the front of the lower leg, the foot goes much further back. So unless these muscles turn on, the calf won't release. So, in down dog and various poses that we're doing, you try to draw the toes back. What else could be done? For some people, it would be difficult to sit in this position. If it is difficult, you could put yourself on a block. Sitting on a block will make it a little bit easier to fold your leg back. You always want the small toe touching down if at all possible. What happens with most people is the outer ankle pushes out. So as I'm in this position, how would I develop these muscles in the front of the lower leg? Well, if my foot's in this position, now I can push against the floor. So I can create greater work in this muscle. Greater strength has to be expressed in this muscle if I try to lift my ankle away from the floor. So by lifting the ankle away from the floor, certain muscles turn on here. If I draw my ankle in toward the side of my body, then muscles along the side of the ankle turn on. As these muscles get stronger relative to the calf, then you find the heel will come down. So that's another way to work. Another point I would make about squatting, sometimes you have people with flat feet. Usually what happens with flat feet is the ankle tends to shift toward the inside, the arch side of the foot. When I lift my toes away from the floor, it begins to turn on certain muscles in the arch. So we work with people who have flat feet. We do a two-stage process to begin to reestablish the arch. And these are people who are on their feet for very long hours through the day. In one particular case, we had a dance instructor lift his toes in his shoes as he was going through his day. And it relieved some of the stress inside his arch. We also took a small book, put it underneath, or small support, put it underneath the front of his foot at the metatarsal bone, so at the bony structure just below the major bones of the ankle at the top of the foot. So we put a small book here, and we had him stay here for about 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. And then through the day, at various times through the day, just working with toes lifted up. And told me after a few weeks he could go from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon with no pain in his arch. And then if he went through the procedure again, then he was good until later in the evening. So developing strength along the outside of the lower leg is very supportive just in general for the foot. Prevents different kinds of problems in the feet, prevents problems in the arch, prevents cramping in the calf, in the arch, and compression on the inside of the knee.